Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast, where I teach educated, successful couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships so that you can stop compromising and start feeling fully alive in your relationship. I'm Alexandra Stockwell, aka the Intimacy Doctor. I'm a physician, a relationship and intimacy coach, and I'm an intimate marriage expert. My husband and I have been married for 26 years. We have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing marriage. I've shown hundreds of couples how to do so as well. So if you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place. I will show you how. Now, let's dive in. Welcome to this podcast where I'm celebrating 100,000 downloads on the Intimate Marriage Podcast. I really enjoyed recording this episode. However, I completely forgot to tell you that I have a present for you as part of the celebration. The Surprising Secret to Having a Fantastic Relationship. It's one of my courses, and to thank you for contributing to the downloads and the growth of my podcast, I want to give that to you. You can go to the show notes and get all the details and see the coupon code so that when you go to pay, you don't pay. Instead, you put in the coupon code 100K and you'll have access to the program for free. And now on to the episode. This episode is a celebration. It's a celebration of a few different things. First of all, a few weeks back, I hit 100,000 downloads. That means that 100,000 times people have been interested and listened to an episode on the Intimate Marriage Podcast. And for me, it's such an incredible celebration. It's a celebration that belongs to me for sure. I created this and it's my vision. It's a celebration that belongs to you also, the listener. You have created this with me. And it's a celebration that really belongs to the world, to the future, because the more individuals and couples that know how to create a truly wonderful, intimate marriage, well, that is making the world a better place. But I'm not done saying why it's a celebration. Today is also a celebration because my incredible son, Christopher Stockwell, is joining me for the show to celebrate. Welcome, Christopher.
Thanks, Mom. It's wonderful to be on the show. You've created a podcast with my sister, and I may have recorded an episode before, but this feels very official, and I'm pleased to be here. And I'm in particular curious because I was listening to you, as listeners probably were too, speaking about this milestone. And in particular, I'm wondering about when you were starting this podcast, if you were envisioning these particular milestones, thinking of 100K, a million. I guess it comes from the YouTube plaques that those milestones, like, to me, mean that much. But, was this something in particular that was a goal for you? And, now that you've hit it, does your perspective moving forward change?
Okay. I love the question. I do want to say that, yes, I've interviewed you, but I interviewed you on the podcast that Josephine and I have had, we no longer do, called What Should I Do? But you've never been on the Intimate Marriage Podcast. For loyal listeners, you know that I have 4 children, and I previously did an episode with our oldest child, our daughter, Josephine. I've also done a podcast episode with my then 9-year-old son, our youngest, but the 2 in the middle have never been on. And after this episode, there'll just be 1. So this is the first time you're here. And before we go further, actually, I want to do what I often do, which is read comments from a listener. And I'm specifically glad to share this comment in the context of hitting 100,000 downloads, because your question, Christopher, was actually superb. I call you Christopher. Pretty much everyone else in your life calls you Chris, but since I'm the one talking, I'm going to continue with that. And so before I answer your excellent question, I want to go ahead and read this amazing message that I received. I stumbled across your podcast yesterday. On the first episode, I felt a sense that there was a way forward. By the third episode, I felt seen. I've been in the military for almost 25 years and have been married to my lovely wife for over 20 of those years. Between daily military life, plenty of moves, 2 young kids, and other family obligations, our marriage has definitely not been what I had hoped. The love is there, but I definitely feel underwhelmed. As in, we have a chance to have something special, to make each other's dreams come true, but we don't. Listening to your podcast over the past few hours, I can already see how I've focused on the things that she isn't doing instead of focusing on the desire that I crave. I believe that through some of your words, I might have a different way to approach her. I want something special. I just need to learn what the special is that she wants and how to communicate. I truly appreciate your episodes, and I can't wait to read the book. And since then, I've heard from this incredible man again saying, I started back from the beginning when he wrote he was on episode number 30. And while there are some amazing ones, I love when your husband is on. Your interaction is sincere, and his input helps me relate to certain feelings and experiences. I am so glad that you found my podcast. I'm glad for you. I'm glad for your wife. I'm glad for your children. I also very genuinely want to thank you both for your service. And for your wife, I want to thank her while she was actively serving and for her service in supporting a spouse who's serving us in the United States. I also want to really acknowledge this listener's willingness to learn something new, because that truly is what motivates me in general, but also specifically with the podcast, to get back to your question, Christopher, is that having a fantastic relationship is a learnable skill. And the main reason that most people don't have inspired and inspiring intimate relationships is because of a lack of education. So there are a few different reasons that I started this podcast. And one of my main ones was to provide education, to provide inspiration. And I've learned from clients, people that I speak with once, who either go on to become my clients or feel satisfied from that one conversation that they have everything they need, or they decide that actually something else is going to be a better fit for them. But regardless, literally 100% of the time, at the end of those conversations, when I ask, what is your takeaway? How do you feel now? And one or both of them respond with the word hope. I feel hope. And so I'm really touched by that listener, because he has hope through seeing a way forward, through getting the education. Let me take a breath and see if you want to comment before I now respond to the question of the milestones, but it will all be in the context that we've just created.
Sure. And I don't necessarily have another question before you answer my initial one, but I will reflect back that I really appreciate hearing that comment, because it makes the listener come alive. When I think about 100,000, to me, it's very abstract. You can think about how many stadiums it's filled, or about, just that number, or even what's next. But to think about how each of those is really a person, or if it's one person downloading multiple times and how meaningful that is. And in particular, when I think about this work for you, in the before you were, you started your business and you had this podcast, a lot of your life was centered around raising us. And so I am so privileged to be able to hear how you've grown and are able to step forward both in, as part of the family unit, but as your own individual. And so this is one of those moments where I admire you and how far you've come in this journey.
Well, thank you. Wow, it was so spontaneous to just invite you to this celebration episode, as you know, and I'm really glad I did. I'm reminded actually of how Rod, your father, is one of two children. I have one brother. My mother has one sibling. My mother-in-law has one sibling. Like my father was an only child. We grew up in families with 1 and 2 children. And it was a really big deal to go on from 2 children to 3 and then 4. And I'm so, so glad that I did. But when you're talking about the numbers being real and how to expand and connect with that many people, that was the first thought that I had, because it's you who are asking me. You who are the second child, who might have been the youngest and went on to become the oldest of 3 brothers. So that's one comment, as well as just the grace with which you see me. I think it's a real privilege for an adult parent to feel seen, not just as a mother or father, but to be seen more fully in wholeness, which you've reflected to me. And I remember when I had the first 100 downloads, and it happened very quickly when the first episodes dropped on Valentine's Day in 2021. And I was just incredulous. 100 downloads. And I knew that some of them were me, Rod, you, Josephine, my friend Stephanie. I said, could you please, you don't even have to listen, but would you please run this on your iPhone so that I can have more downloads? Because downloads, actually, it's a very interesting unit. It's the number of people who've listened, which is what your question was, which is what I want to say more about. But the number of downloads also influences the rankings of a podcast, which in turn influences how many people know it exists. So do ratings and review, by the way. So if you're a loyal listener, or this is the very first episode you're listening to, or you listen every now and then, please leave a rating and a review wherever you listen, because that is a way that you can contribute to bringing this message of personal responsibility, clarity, open-hearted, genuine connection, and sensuality to more people. So join me in sharing the message by leaving a rating and review. So anyway, when I started, I did dream. I really dreamed of 10,000 downloads. That just seemed so totally amazing. Like, I haven't directly spoken to 10,000 people from the stage or in an intimate setting in private coaching or when I've done group coaching. Like, 10,000 downloads just to me seemed so much to take in. And I did it. I remember realizing it actually when I was at 12,000. I didn't know when I got to 10,000, but when I was at 12,000, I realized, oh my gosh, this milestone, which had been so exciting for me. I wasn't driven to accomplish it. I just continued to create episodes so that I had something useful, meaningful, helpful, inspiring to share with people. But I realized, oh, that milestone is in the rearview mirror. Any comments? Or should I keep going?
Yeah, keep going. I'm enjoying hearing your story. I'd love you to take us to the present day.
Okay, so then once I was at 12,000 and realized 10,000 downloads was in the rearview mirror, then I was like, I wonder if I can get to 50,000 downloads. But I have to say that by the time I had 12,000 and realized 10,000 had passed, it's hard to hold like 12,000 individual downloads. It's more of like a concept or a feeling because the number is so high. But my goal was 50,000. And it was actually monumental for me to get there. And once I got to 50,000, and it didn't really take that long, I was like, oh, I get it. This is sailing forward. I just need to concentrate on interviewing really interesting, amazing couples and individuals and sharing from my heart. And the rest, it's just part of the technology. It's part of the interest. It's part of people wanting to tap in and discover what's my next pivot? What's my next opening? What's the next desire I'm going to honor? How am I going to make that next communication? And when I was at about 80,000, I casually mentioned that to my coach, Anne, who interviewed me for the 100th episode. And she said, "You have 80,000 downloads? What does that feel like?" And it's a little bit embarrassing or awkward to say, but it's also meaningful. So I will. I was like, oh, that just like skims the top of my head. I can't really feel that. And she's like, well, it's time to feel that. And so what I really did, in addition to energetically expanding, is that I really deepened my relationship to my mission, because my mission is to change the cultural narrative around long-term relationships so that people know long-term relationships are not where passion just tapers off and fades away. It is not where you have this comfortable, bland companionship. Let me say those are both possible scenarios, incredibly prevalent scenarios, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I want people to know that, either because they are experiencing that themselves or they know someone who is. And in any case, they know what to aspire to because it's in their world. The cultural narrative has included the kinds of long-lasting, dynamic, nourishing relationships that I'm talking about on every episode. And as soon as I expanded and really understood that I'd need to connect with a lot more than 80,000 individuals in order to live my mission and evolve the cultural narrative and be a voice that contributes to really enhancing and changing the trajectory of the future for individuals and our society, then I have to say 100,000, it's a significant number. I'm doing a whole podcast celebration on it, but it does not fill me up. There is room for 1,000,000 downloads in my system because I want to reach that many people in order to normalize the kind of intimate marriage that I'm talking about. And I know that for each couple, that expresses itself a little bit differently. So I'm not talking about anything cookie cutter, but the main way right now that people learn about intimacy is porn and rom-coms, but even rom-coms, which are super inadequate, are really drying up and being dehydrated. My beloved friend Susie sent me an article in The Atlantic recently where they talk about the death of the sex scene, that even on film, like non-porn movies, erotic chemistry and the feeling of two individuals being pulled towards one another and a kind of juicy open-heartedness that's kind of being shed from movies, as in the rom-com setting, the sex is more like porn sex. I don't mean it's like porn in terms of, well, I don't need to explain that, but in terms of how quickly things move and how there isn't intimacy and chemistry and erotic energy that's mysterious and expansive and really requires being present in your own body with someone else in their body, that's no longer a kind of typical part of a rom-com sex scene. So all of this is to say that 100,000 downloads is this massive milestone for my former self and for my current self looking towards the future. It's one really beautiful celebration worthy step on the path toward having the invitation I offer the world be really familiar and well known to millions of people. So that's my genuine answer. And I'd love to know what your genuine response is, though I'm just saying that because it's banter, not because I would question that your response would be genuine, you being you talking to me and all.
Well, I really enjoyed your answer. I think that was fantastic and very insightful. And in particular, I want to kind of touch on your reference of the movies and intimacy in the movies. And my gut feeling is that a lot of that comes into pacing. And I think it makes a lot of sense to talk about pacing because of how long it took to get to 1,000, 10,000, 50. I remember very recently you said you're 80,000. It feels like it was only a week or two ago, and things will just kind of keep snowballing from here. And
Yes, that's right. That's right. It's slightly more, but it's not that long ago.
right, I built a very small community up to about 800 people, which took quite a while and didn't go past that. But I have a lot of respect for where you've taken it. And when it comes to intimacy with pacing, one of the things that I've had to think about the most in my life with my intimate relationships, and this is true both romantically and otherwise, is to know, when you're taking things too fast, when it's time to slow down, both in terms of when you're getting to know someone, which is more applicable for me, but even just when you want to rekindle something or when you want to connect on a deeper level. How do you know what the right pacing is, and what's a good way to check in with you and your partner about that?
That's a really important question. And just so that I answer it in the right way, are you asking during more of a sexual encounter or also just the pacing of the relationship overall?
Well, in particular, I think about movies where one of the reasons why intimacy in that way is not necessarily as drawn out is because things are much faster. You have a lot more cuts. This is what I think. This is my theory. You don't have the space to let things evolve in that way without moving on to the next thing. And so for me, one of the things I would need to do is to slow down. Now, whether you want to take this more sexually would seem appropriate given the podcast, but I was leaving it open ended to see where you wanted to take that in general.
Okay, well, um, you've seen many more movies than in your 24 years than I have in my 54 years. However, I don't think I agree with you. I think that in terms of actual three-dimensional time, obviously what you're saying is true because there's 2 hours or an hour and a half for the movie to happen. And so, yes, things have to happen more quickly. But there's a kind of a pacing that can happen in movies that doesn't feel disconnected. I would almost say rushed or depending on who's involved and how they feel, almost violating. But even I think pacing is one of the really important elements, but I think the significant one, which then influences pacing, is presence, mindfulness, being embodied. Because when you're just in your head, disconnected from yourself in some way, then it's not possible to get the pacing or the open-heartedness in a calibrated way. In other words, if you are really connected with your own body and your own desire, then things can move fast and be incredible. And things can need to be so slow and careful and more energetically attuned and refined. Like human bodies can operate at both speeds and many in between. And the key is to make sure that you're in right relationship with yourself and your partner is, and you are with one another, with, I think, the, to me, obvious rule, but one that it makes sense to state, which is that in that scenario, you move at the pace of the slowest person, of the person with the slower pace, because that's how you feel. That's how you remain connected. That's how you remain in a really erotically rich relationship. Because if you move quicker than your bodies are ready to, whatever that pace is, then it creates disconnection and a kind of emptiness, even if it feels like, oh, I'm getting what I came for. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I guess I was kind of running through my life as though it was a movie, thinking of examples. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about how that applied. And actually, I was thinking about today because you reached out and said, "Hey, would you join me on the podcast?" And I was kind of out of it a little bit and in my head. And
Actually, let's be precise. What I said, I called you and you didn't answer. And then I texted you and said, "Hi, I'm going to pull up my phone. Are you available?" I said, "Hi, I'm not in the mood to chat right now." So I said, "Okay." And I was prepared to let it go, thinking that if you weren't in the mood to chat with me, you wouldn't be in the mood to be heard by hundreds of people. And you said, "Do you need something?" And I said, "I'm about to record a podcast episode celebrating 100,000 downloads and wondered if you want to join me on the podcast." And you said, "Oh, wow, as a guest?" And you called me and you were a yes. And so please continue with how you were thinking about that. But I love that you picked that example in relation to pacing and connection and all that. So go ahead.
Right. Well, one of the things is I was really not present. And so I didn't even want to engage in a phone call. But I feel so privileged that you would invite me, and I want to say yes. And also, it's good to get a jolt out of it. Um, and so I needed 10 minutes to kind of set up the space and to be in the right mind space. And right before we press start, I just said I'm going to be present. So that was it. We didn't really have an agenda of stuff we were going to talk about. We didn't script any of this. I just said I was going to be present and let you take the helm. And in this case, I was able to kind of to recenter myself, but I did it kind of without intention. Like I wasn't really sure. I cleared my desk. Right, it's nicer to be in a pleasant space. I changed what I was wearing, splashed some water in my face. But what's the best way to center yourself? And in particular, if either you or your partner are out of it at any moment, you know, what's the best way to get centered again, to be present in that moment?
Wow. $1 million question. Really fantastic. In fact, Earlier today, I was doing a Zoom webinar, and this wonderful man who is in the process of getting divorced for the second time asked me a question that had to do with attachment styles. And my answer to him was to really be in the present moment. Now, it's a very different context than the one you're bringing up, but it's relevant because he was talking about anxious attachment and someone who is clingy or inclined to self-sabotage. There are a lot of different ways that that insecure attachment can show up. And so I was saying, rather than letting the past govern the future, and in a way what you were talking about before is less the past governing the future and more just the future governing the present, that being in the present moment allows us to interact with what's really there rather than some theoretical fear that someone's going to leave us, or that was in the context of the conversation with him. And so for you, like the way we're having this conversation, I would say the way to be present. Well, there are two that I often tell people. One is to feel the bottom of your feet. That when you feel the bottom of your feet, then you're going to be grounded from the feet all the way up. If you, for example, focus on your heart, which many people like to do in order to get present, that's really beautiful, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be grounded and present below the heart. So I encourage people to feel the bottom of their feet. And I noticed for me, as soon as I said that and actually brought my attention to my feet, my voice got lower and a little bit slower, and I feel much more present. I don't feel as like joyful, celebratory, which is an awesome way of being, especially when cultivating intimacy in a relationship. But to stay really calibrated, I feel the bottom of my feet and get more grounded. And so if I were in a situation where I was going to make a meaningful decision or have deeper emotional connection, this is a much better state from which to do it. And then the other thing is to breathe. So often we just we don't really fill our lungs. We just breathe a little bit. Like I'm exaggerating with like shallow breaths, but even if I'm just exaggerating to make the point, but any shallow breathing is much more in a state of the sympathetic nervous system governing things, fight or flight. And it's the antithesis to ease, relaxation, and presence. So just breathing more deeply and more fully makes a big difference. And while we're talking about this on the podcast, I'm exaggerating in order to convey two very easy ways to become present. What I really love about both of them is that they can be done very discreetly. You don't need to look like a weirdo. Nobody needs to know that you're doing it. I mean, you could step aside and go into the bathroom to have some privacy, but you really don't need privacy. You can be with somebody in any kind of context and bring your attention to the bottom of your feet in order to slow down, reconnect with yourself, and be available for another quality of connection with someone else. How does that strike you?
That's great. My feet were actually not flat on the ground when you started your response, and they now are firmly planted. And while I was feeling present before, I now feel that it's an active choice that I'm making to be present, and I appreciate the insight you brought to that.
Well, thank you for the question. I have one more thing that I want to bring up in this conversation. I don't know actually if you know this, but it's something that I have certainly shared before, which is that really my heart and care is with children Because at some point, actually, years ago, it occurred to me, there are all these adults in therapy working on childhood issues. Wouldn't it just be more efficient if parents learned how to parent so that their children didn't need to recover in therapy? Now, of course, I'm a huge fan of personal growth and self-awareness, and I think therapy has its place. Coaching definitely does. But there's a lot of trauma that happens in childhood that really isn't necessary if parents learn how to do things differently. And so, one of my major motivators is to serve children and future adults by teaching their children how to have really fantastic relationships. And I say that because I'm here talking to one of my children, and also because I want to take this opportunity to really, truly express my gratitude for what you've taught me, Christopher, about how to interact with other human beings. And there's so much that I learned in my medical training and in my various professional trainings that I've done. I've done many and highly varied ones. And I've also learned an incredible amount in my 27-year marriage. But without question, one of my deepest, most fundamental, and at times most challenging teachers has been you, Christopher, specifically around respect. Because when you were in high school, I'm going to describe it this way in this context. It's not that it's 100% precise, and you can adjust anything so it feels more true if you like. You're welcome to that. But I would say that you had an allergy, sometimes an anaphylactic allergy, other times just a serious allergy to being disrespected. And while that was very challenging for me as your mother, I'm so immensely grateful for the standard you had for yourself in being respected, such that I learned very quickly when I wasn't respecting you. And most of the time, initially, I actually didn't know it. I didn't know that I was being disrespectful to you until you responded in ways that seemed so crazy to me. But then over time, I understood how the way I had treated you seemed so crazy to you. And that is something that, well, quite frankly, contributes to me being such an excellent coach for men. Because between Daddy Rod's more mild manner and your more intense manner, I feel like I've been privileged to have an extraordinary education in how important it is to respect a man, and how, as a woman, I really didn't appreciate how disrespectful I was until it was in my face, courtesy you. I mean, that's not the only place I learned it, but it's certainly one of the big ones. And who would have imagined, with our volcanic communication in high school, that we would be celebrating on this podcast in such an open-hearted, meaningful way together?
Yes, I appreciate that. I think that's a very fair, and thank you for holding me in that way. I know that it hasn't been easy at times, and it makes me really appreciate where our relationship is now. And I do feel a great amount of respect and really appreciate your place in my heart, in my life, and in my heart. And in particular, it invites me to communicate with you much more, especially right now. We talk multiple times a week. And there has been times since I've left the house where we didn't talk for a month or more. And
Not because we had a fight, just it wasn't appealing to you, I assume. Or I don't know. I never actually asked that question. It's just you were in your life, I was in mine. But now I think we're in one another's lives more actively, given that we don't live in the same house because you're a grown-up.
Sure. And having respect has been one of the things that's defined a lot of my life, both with you and with others. It's one of the reasons why it's made sense for me to leave a job. It's something that's been a deal breaker for me in a relationship, and it's been foundational in our family culture as well. And I don't think I was being so intentional. I was mostly away enjoying the college experience and focused on other things, and so it wasn't that I was avoiding or that it didn't make sense.
Yeah, I didn't
But
take it that way.
yeah, there were other things that the two of us were focused on. But I think in any relationship, the barometer that I set for myself being intimate with women is, does that relationship and spending time with them elevate my life more than it would be alone? And I have a great relationship with myself, and I enjoy being single and alone. And so it really means something if someone does hit that mark. It's a high threshold. And so I'm very clear that in my life, communicating with you and having you be such an active participant in my life and giving advice and sharing those moments and being here for your podcast and sharing in your successes as well really elevates and contributes in such a positive way to my life and hopefully likewise to yours.
Oh, unquestionably. Unquestionably. And I think it has a certain sweetness because it wasn't always easy. And each of us had to internally pivot towards one another to heal what was so complicated. And I just think that sprinkles the rest of the journey with a special sweetness for us, even though I don't think about it that often. When I do, that's what I feel. You know, in every interview, I state that intimate relationships are the ultimate vehicle for personal growth, and then ask a question, which I'm going to ask you. And you could answer this in the context of your relationship with me, with your family members, or one of the women who has been an important girlfriend for you in your life, whatever you choose. And you don't have to say which, or you can. But what have you learned about yourself through being in relationship in an intimate way with someone else?
I think it's a great question. I think what I've learned about the most for myself, well, I really think of each relationship that I've been in, both romantically and otherwise, as being an opportunity to exhibit and be present with a different part of myself. And I used to kind of find this as something problematic, but I really have started to embrace that I can have different energy around different folks, that I can connect on different levels. And so each relationship that I've had has been an opportunity to do a much deeper dive into whatever side of myself that comes out the most with that person. And so I really valued that, mostly in retrospect, as a moment in time to be able to more clearly define exactly who I am myself.
Thank you so much for being on the show and for defining yourself so others can experience it so magnificently. Thank you, Christopher.
And thank you, Mom. And just as in your podcast, this is 100,000, and pretty soon it will be far in the rearview mirror for you. This is a moment in time, and I look forward to seeing both where my other intimate relationships go and what they bring out in me, but also how our relationship is.
Absolutely. And I'm back to remind you to go to the show notes so you can take advantage of this celebration and receive your free access to the surprising secret to having a fantastic relationship. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to leave the Intimate Marriage Podcast a 5-star rating and review. And if you want fun, effective instruction on how to create a lifelong, passionate marriage, the Aligned and Hot Marriage Program was created for you. This is my signature program, and it contains all the best practices I have developed. I've applied them in my own marriage with great success and seen how helpful they are for the hundreds of couples I have coached. The Aligned and Hot Marriage Program will give you everything you need to transform your marriage, turn it on, and feel more connected than ever in just 8 weeks. Go to alignedhotmarriage.com and get started today.